Welcome to Impact Farming, where we introduce you to the people and ideas that will have a massive impact on your farming operation. Brought to you by Farm Marketer. Sit down, start the engine, and let's roll with today's show.
Hello, everyone. Tracy here. Welcome back to another episode. I am so thankful to have you joining me for another fantastic conversation. But before we dive right in, a quick word from this week's sponsor.
Looking for higher returns on every acre? KWS Hybrid Rye delivers. With market-leading yields, 30% more grain than conventional rye, and lower input costs. This crop works as hard as you do. Less spraying, efficient fertilizer use, and earlier harvest means you get more from every acre. More yield, more profit, more reasons to grow KWS Hybrid Rye. Visit kws.com/ca to learn how hybrid rye drives ROI on your farm. KWS, seeding the future since 1856.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode. Today, I have returning guest Gerry Friesen, the recovering farmer. Gerry, how are you?
I'm well, Tracy, and you?
Good. I am so happy to have you back on the show. I'd say it's probably been about a year. What's jogging my memory is I think the last time we spoke was when you published and launched your book, and it's been a year. So how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. And it was actually, I was kind of surprised. I got a notification from my publisher on Friday, I believe it was, that it was my 1 year book anniversary, they call it, or something.
Oh.
So it was kind of exciting because it feels like a lifetime ago, and yet it doesn't feel that long ago.
Yeah. Well, happy book anniversary.
I think so, but thank you.
You're welcome. So I know most of the agriculture community is familiar with you, but we have a lot of new listeners and viewers. Do you mind sharing a little bit about you before we get into our conversation?
Sure, not a problem, Tracy, and thanks for having me. I always enjoy talking to you. I used to farm. I grew up on a grain and poultry farm and took over the family farm shortly after I graduated from high school. I had grown up, like I said, on a grain and poultry farm. When my brother and I took over, we really weren't into grain farming, so we decided to diversify into hogs, which is another whole story. Regardless, that's what we did, and we farmed. And like all farmers, we faced some significant challenges. And through the course of all of that, in 2004, I guess it was, Tracy, I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression. And I say it thus began a journey of recovery. Discovery came a little bit later. I, of course, found out that my mental health issues had started much before 2004. I just hadn't recognized it as such. But then as the farm was winding down, I got involved with the Manitoba Farm and Rural Stress Line, took their intensive counseling training. And that's really when I started that journey of discovery, understanding mental health, understanding mental illness, which really helped me kind of connect dots for myself. And then in 2010, I keep saying I was manipulated into talking publicly about my story. And I say manipulated as if it was a bad thing. I've never been sorry that I started talking about it publicly. It's interesting how when we talk about our challenges we have with other people, they start opening up and we can have these beautiful conversations. We learn from each other. So I kept talking about it. And somewhere along the line, people asked me, why did you write a book? And I'm not sure I even have an answer for that, but I did. And here we are.
That was my next question, Gerry. Why the book? No,
well,
to back
okay,
up. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, Tracy, in 2010, along with being manipulated into telling my story, that same person also challenged me to start writing a weekly blog, which I did. I often say that my train of thought, if it doesn't leave the station without me, in fact, is good for about 600 words, and then it's done. And over the course of time, I had thought of perhaps compiling those into a book, but then I'd go back and read some of it. some of the stuff I had written and wasn't that enthused about it. Others, when I would tell stories about some farming escapades, they would say, "Well, you should write a book." And ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what I did. I sat down and started writing a book, and here we are.
Yeah. Well, and it's not an overnight journey, right? I love,
No,
and I mean, I would like to say I've been privileged to walk alongside of you for a small part of your journey. And where you started sharing, we've done a few episodes together. I've heard you share your story and then just grow in that role. And it's been amazing to see that. And I was so happy. And actually, did I even encourage you to write a book? I might have
I
said
wouldn't.
something. Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised, Tracy, and I will never forget the first interview we did was in November of 2018. And I had just shared my story at a Farm Management Canada uh, annual meeting or whatever it's called. And that's when I met you. That's when you and I first started talking. And yeah, we've talked a few times since.
Wow, time does fly. Wow.
And in fact, I've never really bragged about this, but that episode you recorded that day won an award.
That one, I had that in my mind earlier when you were talking. I think we've done several episodes, and then I put that forward as one of my favorite episodes of that year. It was my choice. Apologies to all my other guests. There's great episodes, but it was just such an impactful episode. And I think it was kind of right around that time where you're really starting to share. We had great feedback. To be honest, I had viewers, listeners message me and say, I broke down sobbing on the side of the road. Thank you. You had those similar feedback. So I put that forward and yeah, we won on that one. So that was pretty cool. I'm a
Yeah,
small part of your journey, Gerry. I walk with you and help you share.
you
So
do.
I am so excited. And when I heard that you were doing this, it's great because I'm a reader. And no matter how many podcasts we have, no matter how many video segments we have, and I will preach that to the stars and back, there is something that's powerful about a book because it is somebody's life wisdom, somebody's journey, and it's all right here in an order that you can't get on any other medium. So, you touched on how it came about, and I'm curious, what has been the feedback? It's been a year now.
The feedback has been incredible, Tracy, and this project actually grew more than I had ever expected it would. And I know you shared some stats with me a year ago, actually, and I was looking for them the other day about people writing books and how many actually get to a publisher, and if it does get to a publisher, how many get sold. And so when I started out on this journey, I had no idea. And it was actually almost frustrating because I went to all the work of writing this thing, getting it published, and then kind of wanting to sit back and go, okay, I did it. And then someone said, oh no, now you have to start marketing this thing. And so it's been an interesting journey. But the responses have been incredible, Tracy. Um, from people I wouldn't have expected responses, and just what they share. And I find it interesting how people will read the book, they'll take note of something in a specific chapter, and write to me about how that resonated with them. And even I know it's called a recovering farmer, and it has obviously a lot to do with my farming career. But I had someone actually heard me on CJOB. I did an interview there last, whenever that was. They heard that he reached out and said, and he's a non-farmer, and that's why I appreciated his feedback. Is he said, I have a brother that deals with mental health issues, and I've never understood them. I'd like to read your book. And I said, yeah, absolutely. Here's a book, read it. But then I want a response from you. And so when he was done reading it, he sent me an email and he says, I now get it. And it had nothing to do with farming, right? And so for non-farmers to also be able to connect to the book was really heartwarming, quite frankly.
Nice. You mentioned one of my next questions I had for you Is there certain trends in the chapters that stand out in your audience, or is it just all over the map on what impacts each person?
It's all over the map, and that's what really surprised me. And just to give your audience a little bit of background to the book is of course I went farming. That's no secret. I talk, of course, about how this mental illness hit me and my response to that, or lack of response, perhaps. But all of that is also driven by the fact, and I facetiously said to you before, I'm a recovering Mennonite, right? Because I grew up in a fundamental Mennonite home. And so do I blame that for my mental illness? Absolutely not. But I know that every step in life, whether it's growing up in that home, the school I attended, all of that contributes to our mental health positively and negatively. And so I kind of mapped that out in there. And so that's why I found it so interesting with some of the responses, because after the fact, and I started realizing this book is selling, I read through it again, and I went to my wife and I said, I have no idea why anybody would buy this damn book because, quite frankly, and it's just okay. Now, if I would have known, so I started second guessing myself, right?
Of course. Yeah. That is so, Gerry, I have done public speaking and I've put myself out there on this show. And there's a certain level of vulnerability, whether you're good with it or not. Some are better at that, but there's a level of vulnerability. And your story by far, that is vulnerable. It is uncomfortable. I can imagine how you felt after you're like, whoa, it's in there. It's all in there, right?
Well, and people have asked me about that whole process in writing the book and what it did for me or to me. And I talk about, and I haven't shied away from the fact that I had difficulty coping a number of years ago. I still do, but I do things a little differently now than I did then. And so I used alcohol to cope, for example. And so when I was reading or writing the chapter on that piece, that addictions piece, it really took me towards the abyss, and I had to put it aside because I didn't like what I was reflecting on. But ultimately, what I did is, yes, I did write it, and again, ultimately, it turned out to be a therapeutic exercise for me. And that vulnerability piece you talk about, and yes, it can be difficult, Tracy, because people have to be mindful. Yes, it's good to be vulnerable, but being vulnerable also opens you up to stuff you might not like, right? And those people that would just as soon say to me, "Well, pull up your pants," you don't. I don't know what you're talking about, or it's your choice to be depressed, or there's no need for your anxiety, or your faith should be stronger, or you need to pray more. Those kind of attitudes absolutely come out when people show vulnerability. And yet at the end of the day, though, by far the majority of people that hear or read the book appreciate the vulnerability.
Yeah. You know, if oh, hey, Gerry, I'm starting on a quote. You and I, quotes, man. You don't know what you didn't know until you know what you didn't know. And I always say, and to be honest, Gerry, maybe I've admitted this in other episodes together, maybe not. I didn't understand mental health either. I was one of those ignorant ones, and maybe I've even said some of those, like, just get it together. Like, why can't they get it together? Because I was fortunate enough to not deal with that level of suffering
Yeah,
where I had struggles and a bad day. It's like, okay, Tracy, get it together. I thought it was that way for everybody. And truthfully, if I've never said this either before, that's part of the reason I continue to share because it's so important. And you don't know what you didn't know until you know what you didn't know, right?
exactly. And that's why I maintain, and it's in the book, I talk about all the professionals I've seen over the years, those that helped a bit, those that didn't help at all, and finally found one that connected dots for me, right? And so they didn't fix me, but gave me a really, really good understanding going back, way back to when I was a teenager and all the way through these years. And with my lack of coping skills and with some of the other stuff that was going on, we're able to connect those dots so that I understood why I was the way I was. And that helps me be more intentional, helps me be more aware, and helps me be more proactive.
Nice. It's, I'm going to say, a journey, right? It was not a one-stop figure it out shop. Yeah.
Oh no. And you know what, Tracy? I'm still learning. And in fact, I did something this winter, tried something different this winter, which quite frankly would make another good chapter for the book, because I discovered more about myself, and it's related to in 2004 when I was first diagnosed. Of course, the doctor throws a prescription at you, right? And they really don't have a lot of choice because there's no X-ray or MRI or blood tests that will determine what your mental illness is, right? And so it's a medication thing, and myself being somewhat naive, just yeah, okay, I'll take the medication and things should get better. And as I discovered this winter, is that I'm a very unique person, Tracy. I come from 8% of the population that deals with a certain DNA thing
Hmm.
that, sorry, I shouldn't even be going into this,
If you want to,
but
go ahead.
that, well, just the fact that I tried the medication piece again and it didn't work because of this unique situation I find myself in. So
Okay.
my point being is I, on a daily basis, have to be very diligent about my mental health, and I keep trying things. And some things work and some things don't.
Well, thank you for sharing. I mean, everything that you can add to the conversation, even if it helps just one person out there, that's that's your story, Gerry, right? Leading
Exactly.
into The Recovering Farmer by Gerry Friesen.
There you be.
Oh, that was a good pitch for you. So, Gerry, I am curious, and I think this is going to be much like asking a parent about their favorite child. Do you have a favorite chapter?
You know, that's an interesting question, Tracy. And I think maybe I do. I think maybe the last chapter of the book, um, where I kind of put all of everything that's happened to me, not everything that's happened to me, but my whole journey kind of encapsulates this. And this is something that actually happened. So in the book, I start each chapter with somewhat of an anecdotal story, right? And and what happened is a couple of years ago, um, my wife and me and my our kids, when they were young, would always go camping, right? And when the kids grew up and didn't want to go camping anymore, we quit. And now my wife had been pressuring me, we should start camping again. And I said, no, want nothing to do with it. No. Long story short is that 2 years ago, we did go camping with our kids. And it was just absolutely amazing what that did to my mental health in a good way. And so we had borrowed a camper, and the following week we bought one because it was enjoyable. Jump ahead a year later, we're camping with our kids again, and as the sun is going down, the grandkids are running around and playing, and it's a beautiful evening. We're sitting by the fire, and all of a sudden, this feeling came over me, and I just blurted out, "I can't believe how happy I am." It actually makes me a little emotional thinking about that because my kids were just their mouth, like they looked at me and went, "Huh? Did we hear right?" And so it just kind of that's the beginning of the last chapter, right? And in the chapter I talk about a puzzle that I'm working on and how I've been fighting with pieces and the pieces didn't fit, and then something would happen in my life and I'd want to take them out. But where I finally come to that understanding that we all put together, our life is a puzzle. I talk about the four cornerstones being the four corners of my puzzle, and that's my health, my family, my career, and my friends. So those four corners make up the corners, right? And I need to be satisfied with the pieces I have. I need to be okay with those parts of the picture that really don't look that great because of stuff I was going through. Because really, each step, each piece is inextricably linked to the next piece, which forms our picture. And so I have to be okay with that. And I am. And I have to be thankful for those people that are there helping me put that puzzle together.
That's well said.
So I think that's the favorite part of my book because that's the happiest part of my book.
Nice. So your book, maybe talk about that, and then I have a few other questions. I like picking Gerry's brain about this experience and sharing your perspective as the author, but the way you lay it out, you share your story, you include your challenges, your wins in there. Do you want to talk about a little bit, what could the reader expect? I'm, of course, going to put links and encourage people to buy it, but do you want to share, just randomly name some of the stuff that's in the book?
Okay, and Tracy, I don't want people to think based on what I just said that this is some sort of self-help book. Although there are pieces, and again, the way the chapters are structured at the end of each chapter, I have what I call a takeaway, which is more of a generic, broad discussion on what I've just talked about in the chapter. But again, I talk about when I went farming, and I use the story in that chapter, one of the first chapters. In fact, we often talk about the identity that farmers have. Um, and how that identity can be threatened. And I tell the story of as a farm was winding down, I walked into a restaurant in Winnipeg and saw a farmer, or not a farmer, a salesman that I had gotten to know in the past. And he asked me how I was doing, and I said, good, and talked about the fact that I was winding down the farm. And I said to him, I don't think I'm a farmer anymore. And he looked at me and he says, maybe you never were. And at first blush, that was kind of like, right? But then I understood what he was trying to say is the fact that I was doing other kinds of work, and I was heavily into farm debt mediation at the time, helping a lot of farm families with that, and I was starting this mental health work, and so there was other areas that I was a little more gifted with than with the farming piece. So I talk about the identity piece. I love to have in most of the chapters at least have some stories about events that happened at the farm and some experiences, and some are funny, and I mean, I had someone else send me a note the other day and said your book is honest, it's humorous, and the third one is, I can't remember what the third one was, but so just so people know, it's not that you're going to start on page one and go, holy Toledo, this is such a sad story, and just carry on that way till you finally reach the end. No, it's a little bit of a roller coaster. But as you well know, I like to use humor when I do presentations, when I talk to people. I like to use humor, so I put some of these stories in there, and so I talk about that identity. I talk about the relationship with my wife. And again, another story is where at one point when I started talking about this publicly, I thought, well, perhaps I need to talk to my wife to find out what impact my journey has had on her. And she told me at one point that it felt like she had been married to 4 different men. Well, I kind of looked at her and said, well, she was lucky because I had been married to the same woman, right? Facetiously, of course. Uh,
Yeah.
the point being that there was 2 of these men that she had been married to, she didn't particularly appreciate. And so there's those kinds of stories. I talk about my involvement in agricultural politics in the 90s when I was chairman of Manitoba Pork, and some of the challenges that threw on me. And I have a chapter on addictions. And so a chapter like that, and also a chapter on suicide, aren't very happy chapters, but they're also things that need to be said because they all, again, encapsulate my journey.
Love it. Okay, I have two questions for you and a few more after that, but two.
That's what I thought. You always have more than two.
Always. And then two more, and then two more. It's just so fun talking to you, Gerry. This is a little bit personal, so go as deep as you want or don't. But I am curious, what was the most challenging part putting this in book format? And you can take that anywhere you want to. What was the most challenging thing about this book that surprised you?
I think the most challenging part, again, Tracy, is when I talk about um, my alcohol dependency. When I was feeling lost in the world I was in, um, when my anxieties were rampant, so to speak, and how I found that alcohol does an amazing job of cooling off the anxiety. But unfortunately, as alcohol leaves the body, it exponentially increases anxiety. So the only way to combat that is to drink more, which I did, which just took me down a really slippery slope. And of course, as everybody can well imagine, that impacts your business, that impacts your relationships, that impacts absolutely everything. And so, again, when I was writing this book, there's times when I would sit back and go, well, how honest do I want to be? And the more honest I was, the more it would have an impact on my mental health at the time. And that's why I say that sometimes I would just simply have to put it aside and just go, I can't do this. But then I would come back to it. And again, ultimately, when it was done and it was out there, I could sit back and go, okay, I've been vulnerable about this. Now it's up to people on how they want to respond to it.
I love that you had the courage to put that out there because I am sure, and you've heard more than I have, that your book, paper, words on paper, I can imagine that book likely serves as a lifeline for more people than you probably even know.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. And again, it's the words on paper. You're right.
Yep.
And like you said before, me and you have done numerous podcasts and I've sometimes after we've done a recording, I've sent you an email and gone, "Oh, I'm not sure I feel very good about it." And yet at the end of the day, the podcast goes out, people listen to it, and then it's gone, right? That book is laying there, right? And so it never goes away. Which is fine, again, because of the response I've had.
You know, Gerry, and I'm living through this. I had a tough stretch in my business, okay, during the pandemic. Didn't we all? For various reasons. That was a special time in history. And businesses were up in jeopardy. And then, of course, budgets. And then you're looking at things and getting concerned. And there was one book that I read, and goodness knows how it landed in my awareness. But I read that book, and I'm going to equate this experience I had to what people are going to have when they read your book that are suffering mentally. I read this book. I'm like, oh. And it's actually, I think you would like it. It's called Peaks and Valleys. And it just talked about something. And the fact that it was words on a paper that I could hold, and it was there at that point in my career when I was struggling and trying to work through these challenges, that book was a bit of a lifeline. And just having it there, in the odd time, I'd open it up and read one of the quotes in it. I'm like,
Yeah.
wow. So I can imagine that a farmer going through mental health on the farm, the incredible challenges that farmers face, if they have that book sitting there versus a podcast. This is beautiful. These conversations are deep and live, but there's something about a book that you just hold it and have it, and it's all there, right?
And you're absolutely right, Tracy. And not, I'm not going to say my book does that or doesn't do that,
It
but
does.
reading books, and there was one, I think it was shortly after the start of the pandemic again, that I read, and I had so many aha moments. And I would have my pen and I'd underline these paragraphs, and I would find myself going back to the book and going, you know what, I read something there that was really impactful, and I'd get through it to that paragraph and read it again. And it's good when we can do that, because we need these reminders. I need these reminders on a daily basis.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you for sharing. So I am curious, and again, go as deep as you want to or not. What has been the biggest win for you personally with this book? Out of all the work you've done, this book, what was your biggest win with that?
You know what, Tracy? I've talked about how reflecting on certain parts of my life was difficult. Um, And I often say, and I've talked to other people that feel the same way about this, very often people that have the mental illness that I do will always look in the rearview mirror, look at their life, and feel it's been an absolute waste. Um, and I have found, and the exercise of writing this book did that, is I would again look back and I would start remembering a lot of good stuff that happened too, right? And a lot of the experiences I had, like I'm sometimes taken aback by the experiences I've been able to have in life. And and at the end of the day, to be able to write this down and then sit back and go, yeah, it wasn't all bad. There was good stuff that happened too. And so that was really impactful. And again, here's an example. Maybe I'm going down a path that you don't even want to go down, but for example, when I got involved in what I call agricultural politics in the 90s, I was quite young. I was 30 years old, and I became chairman of Manitoba Pork. And I have a chapter in my book actually that I talk about imposter syndrome, because I've got imposter syndrome bad. And so I find myself in this position, being elected to this position, and I wake up the next morning and that quote you used before about don't know what we don't know till we know what we don't know, or something, whatever it was
Yeah.
you said. That was me. And I'm sitting there going, what do I do? And when I look back, I now understand I was looking for my strength to do these things in all the wrong places. And so that was a learning experience, and that's something that I can utilize today. And so there's these experiences again that I can look back on now and really feel good about them.
Love it. This is deep conversation, Gerry, and I love it. It's kind of meeting me where I'm at in life. Isn't it funny? We're having the mental health conversation, but as humans, one, we have a negativity bias. We just see what's wrong and remember what's wrong before all the good stuff. But I've come to this realization before, and I don't know if you're like me, that we expect ourselves to be perfect and know
Yes.
everything
Yes.
before we're there. But isn't life the journey of becoming and going through good and bad as life? Like that's kind of where I'm at now, and where you're saying that it's like this is the journey, the good and the bad, isn't it?
Sure. I just told you I had looked back at a lot of these experiences I had, right?
Yeah.
Here's another quote for you. Experience is what you get when you don't get what you want.
Oh,
And so to your point about we expect to be perfect, we expect to be able to do this, and yet we trip and fall. and we can get very discouraged about it, or we can take that as a learning experience, right?
Yeah.
And so we have to, we can't let our last decision dictate our next one, because we're just going to continue then getting too much experience. So
Really.
we have to be able to have that ability to work through these things. And it took me a heck of a long time to learn that.
I like it. I could see how the book would be. That's my next question for you. And you've mentioned it a few times. I am sure this book has been healing for you, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely, it has. Uh, and it's made me very much aware of the impact that, first and foremost, my wife and kids have had on my journey. Uh, I understand what I probably put them through, but I also understand how they have helped me and supported me. And again, going back to that chapter on addictions, where I talk about that experience and the reasons why I was drinking and all of that. And at the end of the day, I say, and what my family did was they invited me out of the closet. And when I wrote that down, actually, I'm going, holy Toledo, this is brilliant. In fact, what I did is I wrote that and then I said, let me repeat that. My family invited me out of the closet. And so that's where I would go to hide my drinking. That's where I would go to hide my financial um, challenges. That's where I would go to hide from my perceived inabilities. That's what we do, right? Closet, it's lonely, but at least I'm safe. And so to come out of that again goes back to being vulnerable, but my family was there to do it. I've had colleagues over the years, friends that have really helped me. Tracy, the conversations you and I have helped me. All of these things, all of these connections are so important. And you've mentioned COVID. I think I mentioned COVID. Um, how we lost that human connection, and how we now really know, and I don't think anybody realized up until that point, but how we now realize and understand how important that human connection is.
Absolutely. Okay. This has been a beautiful conversation. Two last places, Gerry. One, I'm going to get you. And I'm sure you're hoping that I wasn't going to say anything, but a big congratulations to you, because a little birdie on social media told me that you won an award for this book, Mental Health Champion Award from Manitoba Pork. You didn't think we were going to get through that without me sharing that, would you? Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
And all I can do, Tracy, is, and I just said this, but I'll say it again. And when I got up for the thank you for getting that, I said that I had been a little befuddled when I got notification that I had won the Mental Health Champion Award, because in my mind, a champion was someone who wins, and something that we hoped the Blue Bombers would do last fall didn't, and what we hope now the Jets will do. But then then I realized there was a second definition, and that's for someone that stands up, speaks out, and works and advocates for something. And so I said, okay, I can see myself being that, but I also said that champions are all surrounded by teams, and I have this team around me, and I'm going to tell you right now, you're on that team, Tracy, and it's these people that are around me that encourage me and that talk to me and that give me the motivation to continue the work I do.
Oh, I love that you say that. And oh, I'm going to make you uncomfortable because I know you're a humble man bringing this up, but champion. I mean, you are winning, Gerry, every day of your story, every step that you take. And most importantly, team, you said it. And you are a champion for others. And I can't help but imagine there's a few people that hold that book and a few people that are going to listen and watch this, grab the book, read it, and go, "Oh," right? Probably more impact than you'll ever know.
Well, yeah, Tracy, yes. But again, I'm going to use another example that I talk about in the book. And that is, you're well aware of, I've done farm debt mediation for 25 years now. And I remember, and again, this is in the book. This is one of those anecdotal starts to a chapter, is where I was sitting and talking to a farm family around their kitchen table about their situation. And he pulled out a letter that he had received from the credit union, which showed that the credit union was poised to take legal action to, in essence, shut them down. And so he read this letter to me. His voice was breaking as he was reading it because he felt so incredibly lost. And when he was done reading it, I looked at him and I said, "Do you know what I did when I got that same letter?" And his mouth just dropped open. And he said, "You know what I'm talking about?" And so I've had countless experiences like that, Tracy, whether it was with the financial challenges I had or whether it's on with my mental health journey, where people just go, "Huh? Really? You get it?" And so that's how I have the ability to make connection with people. And I mean, I did a webinar last week, and someone asked the question: Is your journey? Do you consider your journey to be a curse or a blessing? And I found that question really interesting. And I said, well, yeah, I get both sides of it. And then I asked that person to reach out to me after the webinar, and then he or she talked about how she felt that my journey was a blessing because of me helping other people. And I go, okay, yes, I get that. But I also sometimes question, did I have to go through all this negative BS to be a blessing? But so be it. Here I am.
Yeah. Funny, what you exactly just said was running through my head. You often wonder the plans for our life, and often they don't make sense in the moment, looking forward. But if you look back, you go, maybe? Could, or shall I choose a positive way to look at that garbage? And it's probably both, but I had an experience like that in life where you go, really? Did I go through that for this?
Yeah.
And I was thinking of that exactly before you even said it.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Goodness, Gerry, I think you and I, our episodes together are probably the only ones I get like teary in because it's just, it's so personal. It's so
Okay,
profound.
let's dig a little deeper. Let's dig a
Oh,
little deeper.
oh dear. We want to go deeper? Oh, yeah. Geez. Yeah. Well, these are deep episodes, Gerry, and that's why I love talking to you. I love sharing, and it's just so important. I'm so happy, and I've said it a few times, that you put those words on paper because I know how impactful they can be. So thank you.
Yes.
Yes, you're such a humble man.
Yes.
Okay,
Well,
we're going to wrap up, and I always like an action item, final words of wisdom. So, of course, I'm going to put links to the book, and I encourage everybody in the audience, if you are going through something similar, please buy the book and read it, among other steps to take. If you know somebody that struggles with mental health, mental illness, read it, because just like we said before, I didn't get it either. And reading something like this, like you said, that reader, it just connects the dots. So somebody in the audience will include these links, but Gerry, speak directly to that person about magic bullets to mental health, words of wisdom, wherever you want to take this.
I love to leave people with 3 points, Tracy. Number one is you are not alone.
Mm,
Number two is it's more than okay to reach out for help. And number three is there's hope and relief.
mm, beautiful. I love it. Those are three powerful ways to end it. Gerry, thank you. I always honestly cherish our conversation. I appreciate the work that you are doing for our industry because, goodness, as we say every time we chat, this industry needs that kind of support, right? So thank you.
Thank you for having me, Tracy. Always enjoy the conversations and really enjoy your passion for the topics that we always talk about.
My pleasure. Thank you. You guys in the audience, if you enjoyed this conversation, like it, share it, get it out there, because all farmers need to hear this, right? We need to support each other, support ourselves. And please grab a copy of Gerry's book and read it, cherish it, spread the word. Thank you guys, and we'll see you on next week's episode. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Impact Farming. For more great episodes and articles designed to help you manage and grow your farming operation, head on over to farmmarketer.com. Don't forget to sign up while you're there. We will see you on the next episode.